Hey everybody, I am your host. We are back at Batter Sports, presenting to you Swing Batter, where topics that you will never get anywhere else. And if you do get them somewhere else, it's because they copied us. I'm your host, Brendan. I'm with my two favorites with their brand new gear, as you can see us wearing, which we're pretty stoked about. Todd, how you doing? How you been? Your hat's fantastic. Does it represent anybody? Anything important to you?
Maybe it represents the Mets and the fact that if I'm going to watch them, I'm going to wear a bag on my head. But yeah, that's basically what this represents. As you can see behind me, my new background, I have the Mario Lemieux water bottle bobblehead that my kids made for a project that we still keep because it's incredibly lifelike. I've got my Batter Sports and Swing Batter hats back there and my own bobblehead of myself. So
fantastic. I'm excited for the growth.
There you go.
Dad, how are you doing? You got a nice hat too. Who are you representing on this one?
Well, I think we had to represent, I didn't even realize this till last night, the National League, who couldn't win an All-Star game for 9 years. I said, what? Is that truly I obviously don't pay attention to the updated modern All-Star games, but I couldn't believe it. How can an All-Star team lose 9 in a row? But then, Todd, do we have a Swing Batter hat for the National League? Oh, they won. They won, so...
Yeah, did you see that record that Codified posted from 1997 to now?
Yeah.
I think they only won twice.
That's depressing to me, being a National League fan, but... Que sera, sera. There are worse things in life, but I think it was ironic in the All-Star game. I think we have spent a lot of time making fun of the Rockies, that the catcher on the Rockies won the game. So, I mean, let's give him credit. And I wonder how many people watching the game, A, had never heard of him before, and B, had no idea who he played for. So, but he won the game.
And with those uniforms, I still didn't know who he played for after he hit the home run until he turned and he showed his shoulder.
I had to look their names up when it came to bat to see who they played for.
This is a baseball podcast.
So is he going to be traded then? Is that what you're saying? If he's on the Rockies, he's trade bait?
Pretty much.
He's a good hitter. They'll keep him. They like the hitters.
I think everyone's a good hitter in Colorado.
Could be.
Yeah, that's my theory. I'm sticking with it. Well, we have a great topic tonight. I'm very excited about this topic. It's a topic that is, I would say, ageless. I think it goes back many, many eras. I'm going to give a couple examples that I have, but the biggest question that I want to know from all of you, and I'd like to hear your opinions down on the chat there, talent or team? And I'll go into what I mean. So last year we had a couple big signings in the offseason. Todd, the Mets lost Mr. DeGrom to the Texas Rangers. So the question to people who follow the Mets, who love Jacob, did they follow Jacob to Texas and become a Texas fan? Or did they stay a Mets fan? Similarly, you could say with Corey Seager, also going down to Texas from the Dodgers. If you're a Dodger fan, do you stay a Dodger fan? Or did you follow Corey over to Texas? Now, for me as a child, this is, I think, really a big deal. Obviously, I have many sports stories with my father. My father introduced me to sports, and again, I'm happy to be doing the podcast with him. One of the sports we did not have in Arizona when I was a child was the NFL. And so every Sunday, we would hope that we could watch a game or whatever game came on, and typically we got games that were on the West Coast for us, which was the Los Angeles Rams, before the Rams moved around quite a bit. And they had a player by the name of Eric Dickerson, and he was a fantastic running back. And so these are the teams that I get to watch as a young child, and I'm watching Eric Dickerson play. Well, lo and behold, he gets traded to the Indianapolis Colts. And he's a Colt, and he's really good, obviously, one of the better players on the Colts. They didn't really do anything. But I follow him over to the Colts, and I'm following the Colts because back in the day, Eric Dickerson was the team. Without a good running back, you didn't have a team. There was no throwing the ball around like you do today. So I follow him. And then after he's on the Colts for a bit, he has, fantastic career. He decides to retire. And I'm stuck because I didn't like anybody else on the Colts, but I certainly didn't follow anybody else, just Eric Dickerson. So I stayed a Colts fan. To this day, the Colts are my NFL team. I was upset when they drafted Peyton Manning over Ryan Leaf, if those remember. And I was also upset when they drafted Edgerrin James over Ricky
Williams.
Thank you. Ricky Williams of Texas. Both of which would have sunk the Colts if they picked the way I wanted them to, which again, why I host a show called Batter Sports by Swing Batter. If you're a baseball fan, I can imagine growing up and having these huge names. Like if you're looking at Ohtani, he has a huge following. His fan base, in my opinion, will follow him wherever he signs. Whether he's an Angel or whether he's Houston or whether he is in Tampa. And you could look at recent times in the NFL with Aaron Rodgers going from Green Bay to now the Jets. A lot of people will probably follow that over because they like Aaron Rodgers. Same with Brett Favre. Similarly with Tom Brady from the Patriots down to Tampa. There are people who just appreciate those people of talent. I know in the NBA, those players move around quite often. So you can follow them around and usually you just have the different teammates. But my question still remains, when I was a kid and I followed that player, completely understandable. You get attached as a kid to these players because they mean so much to you. They either made a play or they were unbelievable. So I would like to know from you, Dad, because you have the longest history of being a sports fan, was there a player that struck a chord with you that you just wanted to follow even after they may have left your team, or possibly did they make you think about changing your team as you were a kid?
Well, I'm a really old guy. And in my era, the players didn't move. When I grew up, my best friend's favorite player was Roberto Clemente. Mine was Willie Mays. My other friend was Hank Aaron. They played on the same team their whole career, basically. I think Mays got traded when he was 42. But otherwise, those guys never played for another team. So the concept didn't even come into play. But it did when the Giants moved to San Francisco. Because I was cheering for the New York Giants, and now they're way out in San Francisco. And for the first couple years, about 5 years, it was easy for me to be a Giants fan. I was following the player. I would obviously they were on the West Coast, so every night when I went to bed, I didn't even know whether they won or not. But I would follow the Giants, and they became my favorite team. But then when New York brought in the Mets, the question is, am I cheering for Willie Mays or for this new team? Again, it was relatively easy in the beginning because the Mets never won. So I could follow the Mets, but I never anticipated them being good. So I followed Willie Mays and hoping he'd get to a World Series. But it changed for me, at least in my memory, in Arizona, where we have the Diamondbacks. We won a World Series in 2001 when Luis Gonzalez got the winning hit. And he was, if you're not from Arizona, he owned this city. I mean, he could advertise car dealerships, whatever it was. He got on television all the time, the radio. He was a nice guy, and everybody loved Luis Gonzalez. Well, he got older, and then it just really didn't make sense to pay him. So he left as a free agent to the hated Dodgers. Now was the dilemma. The most popular guy in town was on the Dodgers. And I noticed they stopped following Luis Gonzalez and they stayed with the team. So for me, there was a time when it was the player, but I think it was easy for me to do that. And then there was a time when it was the team. I think now, maybe I'm wrong, but I think most people follow the team with one final story. And again, it's not a baseball story, but it seems to me when LeBron James left Cleveland, where he grew up in Cleveland, drafted in Cleveland, and he goes to Miami. I don't know many people in Cleveland who cheered for Miami. In fact, they were furious with James. They burned his jersey and everything like that. So it seems to me like the team right now takes precedent because the players move so much. But that's where I'm at.
Todd, what do you got? What do you think?
This was very formative to me in my childhood because where we lived when I was a kid was upstate New York. And I just remember kind of Plattsburgh before we moved over to Little Falls. I was a Montreal Expo fan. I liked the Montreal Expos. I liked the design on the hat. Didn't know what it was. but I liked it. It looked cool. And when we would go visit Grandpa, we'd go to Montreal Expo games with Dad, you, and Grandpa and Uncle George. And we'd go sit in the upper deck in Olympic Stadium. I'd get ice cream all over my face. Everybody'd speak French Canadian to me. They'd laugh at the silly American kid. And then I'd sleep in the car on the way back to Messina, where my grandparents lived. Just had really good memories. And the guy I followed on that team was Gary Carter. In Little League, I wanted to be a catcher, and I tried to model myself after Gary Carter. I'd watch his stance. I'd get behind the plate just like Gary Carter. I wanted to throw people out just like Gary Carter. I wanted to hit just like Gary Carter, because Gary Carter, All-Star Game MVP in 1981, All-Star Game MVP in 1984. The guy was he was flashy. He was fun. He was offensive at a time when you had Johnny Bench, but it really wasn't a pattern that catchers were offensive. I didn't know this at the time, but the Expos had actually drafted him and brought him into the organization as a shortstop, and then converted him to a catcher in the minor leagues. And when he was traded at the end of the 1984 season to the New York Mets, I could finally justify cheering for the same team that my dad cheered for, and pretty much the family cheered for it. My grandfather cheered for it, and my dad cheered for it. And I've been a Mets fan ever since. You say it was like front running or whatever because they started winning. They got Keith Hernandez over from the Cardinals, and Gary Carter's first game with the Mets, what do? Hits a home run in the 10th inning for the Mets to win the game, and just he just exemplified for me like that gritty, like, being a catcher at a time when I was in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, playing catcher in Little League and just kind of having fun with it. He was the guy. And so the reason I became a Mets fan was because my family was obviously a Mets fan, but Gary Carter gave me a reason to be a Mets fan because he was my favorite player in the Expos. And he wasn't on the Expos anymore. So that was, that's my story. So yeah, I cheer for Laundry now, but I originally cheered for talent.
And how in age-wise, what was your age when you really identified or really caught on to Gary Carter?
It had to be 1981, I think, when the Expos made the playoffs, because they had that split year where it was the first time they had like a round before the round and the Expos made the playoffs. And, Gary Carter was just performing well in the postseason. I'm trying to remember, look it up here. Like, what did he hit in that postseason? He just did really well. But I think I was like 8 years old at the time and just getting into baseball, and this catcher, Gary Carter. But yeah, it was. It definitely around 8 or 9, and then like 10 years old, and he just got too expensive for the Expos. It was funny, I read this thing where the Prime Minister of Canada once said he was really happy he didn't have to run in an election against Gary Carter because he would have lost. He was that popular. He was that popular in Canada. But just a great, just a fun guy, and tragic, he passing away from the brain tumor and everything, but just a fun guy to watch. And I'm going to tell you, there's no way I was the only kid that tried to be Gary Carter in Little League. There had to be like every kid that was a catcher in Little League at that time either wanted to be Gary Carter or wanted to be Thurman Munson or like it was just that time. Or like maybe some of the older kids wanted to be like Johnny Bench or something like that. But then you had Carlos Pena for the Pirates, who he was the first one, I think, that was just like sit down and like stick his leg way out if nobody was on base, because he was like, I'm not blowing my knees out for these guys. But it's just kind of a cool era to be a part of.
Yeah, I remember that when you started to play catcher in Little League, we also followed catchers quite playing the game, watching the game, because when you're watching the game, the catchers really, you didn't have all the scoreboard, all the screens that they do today, but the catcher controlled the game. And I think that was what you probably admired about Gary Carter, because the pitcher was looking in, he was calling a game, he controlled the pace, He controlled the temperature, if you will. And I also loved in Little League when you did play catcher, for those that did, being able to talk to the batter. It's an art. Yeah. There's an art form to a catcher that I think this is, again, great catchers. Molina strikes me as one of those. He would talk to the batters, and he would challenge them to steal on him. He would challenge them to do things. And at the bat, and there's so many stories of catchers telling players what pitch is coming. To challenge them, just to be like, yeah, here's what's coming. You're not going to be able to hit it because you're terrible. Because I know you.
So this is an all-star game rounding third story about a catcher and talking to the batter. 12th inning, the National League was home. It was tie game. Stan Musial comes to bat, and Yogi Berra says to him, my legs are getting tired. And Stan said to him, don't worry, I'm sending you home in a couple minutes. And he proceeds to hit a home run to win the game.
Jeez.
Oh, it's such and I imagine that if you were a ghostwriter or you were a writer of any kind, sitting down with any catcher would have so many great stories. Molina would be fantastic. Would just be fantastic to just hear what his stories are. But again, I think if you're going to talk about the eras, I think Ohtani is going to define that. As far as I know, I'm not an Angels fan. I follow Ohtani.
Absolutely.
I follow everything that he's doing. I think he is changing. Like, did you see the draft that happened in baseball? And they asked the pitchers if they were going to try to hit and what their focus is. And they're like, well, no, I'm just going to focus on pitching. He's changing the way people are looking at pitchers.
Yep.
And he is so revolutionary, had such a revolution to the position that people forget he had the elbow surgery. He had Tommy John.
Yeah.
They don't even remember the fact that he had an injury. And he came back from that. He was hitting. Like, we talk about Bryce Harper coming back early. Like, I don't know what you pay him. I don't know what you do, but just the selling of your gear, his jersey, his hat, the team's following, like, you get an entire country when he signs with you. Like, if you were going to say his top areas, like the Giants, Seattle, these would be great, huge signing for him with the following there.
Do you think that happened with like McGuire or Bonds?
Bonds was so hated. No one followed Bonds. McGuire was only beloved when he went to St. Louis from Oakland. He didn't have
There were people following them as the Bash Brothers in Oakland.
Yeah, but him and Jose were not like the mature, like, oh, they're good at baseball. They're kind of like, everyone kind of treated them like comedy shows, if you will. They were kind of cartoonish. They were so large.
Yeah,
like the players that I remember like following, like a Randy Johnson, Montreal, Seattle, Arizona, right. New York, back to Arizona. Like, those are individuals that I could see you following their careers. Especially when he left Seattle, because he played so good for Seattle. But
what about Griffey? Ken Griffey?
Oh, remember Eric Davis? Eric Davis was a well-known player too.
Okay, I was just confused. I thought you meant Griffey moved. He never moved, right?
No, I think he played for the Reds towards the tail end.
Played for the Reds his whole life, didn't he?
No, Ken Griffey Jr.?
He played for Seattle.
Oh, I forgot about Seattle. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, yeah. He went from Seattle over, and then the other thing is, then you have people with names on their jersey that just ended up doing so bad in marketing. Like, if you look at the popularity of an A-Rod through the years,
oh god,
like if you want to see a graph that is like an election cycle, like, you would not believe his graph. Like, when he was in Seattle, everyone loved him. Then he signed with Texas, and everybody hated him. He broke baseball.
Did anybody in Seattle stay an A-Rod fan?
No.
When he went to Texas?
When he signed for that much money, it was like, this greedy man. How dare this greedy guy go after?
And then it happened over again, because when he was in Texas and he was tearing up the league, the Rangers, they loved him in Texas. Yeah. Until he left, and then they hated him.
I'm telling you, this graph, and then he cheats. I mean, doesn't cheat, but I mean, he had the little suspension. I was thinking more like, you misunderstand. Then I still remember, like, the play. This is how sad. He's had a great career. I still remember the play where he hit the glove on the infield on the pop-up. when he's running by, and then tried to say, "Oh no, I didn't interfere at all, at all. I didn't do this at all."
The Astros just did that recently. I think Altuve just did that recently.
A-Rod was under such a microscope, but now today he's doing announcing for baseball. He's cleaned up his image. He's more like a likable guy, I guess. But talk about a framework.
That's what that's what Mary and J-Lo will do for you.
I think the example of Randy Johnson was good because I think that he did have fans that followed him because he was so unique. I think most guys, when they leave a team, the people in the city feel slighted by him, and they get mad at him.
Well, I mean, that didn't happen with DeGrom.
Yeah,
I think the majority of the Mets fans were they understood the DeGrom thing. They know the Mets aren't giving him 5 years, and I think he'll get a if he ever pitches in Citi Field again, he'll be welcomed.
I think the problem with DeGrom is his injuries. So I mean, he's just not. It was like, well, good luck with that. He's been injured a lot, and now this year he's already out. I think that's a bigger deal. Like with Randy Johnson, you lost 15 strikeouts, 12 strikeouts a game on a regular basis.
But did you get a sense that Randy Johnson leaving was vindictive because he hated the team? Like, I think it's different when a player leaves and it's bad blood with the team.
Agree.
Like A-Rod's a perfect example, but you get like players where they leave and it's like good riddance.
Yeah.
Like thank God this one's out.
Right.
Do you think that's the way the Pirates felt about Bonds when he went to the Giants?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. He had such an irascible personality that the players didn't like him, and then that gets out. You may have liked the way he played, but that, he's a problem in the dugout. No, they were not. I think they knew that they were in trouble without him as a team, but he was not. From what I read, I'm not from Pittsburgh. When I read on that team, Andy Van Slyke was more popular than Barry Bonds.
Oh, wow.
Well, they had big problems, the two of them.
Yeah,
they went head to head all the time.
Right, and he went head to head with managers, and he's just not a nice guy. So he was very self-centered, and so I don't know. I don't know how much of that gets to the fans, but the stories leak out, and they say, more trouble than he's worth. And
there was a young pitcher for the Mets that the Mets got rid of because he had a bad reputation. Scott Kazmir.
Yeah.
We ended up going to the Rays and doing well, but just as a young kid coming up, there were rumblings.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just say that there were rumblings and personal issues.
Yep.
There's
a funny story about Curt Schilling. That when Curt Schilling, also not a popular guy, that when he was on the Diamondbacks, his nickname on the team was Table for One.
I thought that was Matt Williams.
Well, no. Curt Schilling was he's just by himself all the time. In fact, I was watching a replay of the ninth inning when the Diamondbacks won the game, and I noticed this for the first time. Tony Womack got a hit to tie the game in the bottom of the ninth, and they showed the Diamondback dugout, and everybody jumped up and ran to the railing except Schilling. He was sitting on the bench, and finally, after 10, 15 seconds, then he bothered to get up and go look at what was going on.
If you look at that team, you had Matt Williams, who is not known for being a jolly old elf. You had Randy Johnson. When he pitched, everyone was scared of him. And you have Curt Schilling. And then you have Byung-Hyun Kim, who after giving up home runs in New York Stadium probably almost got killed by Matt Williams.
Isn't he he's the one that gave up the home run to Cal Ripken in the All-Star game?
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
I think he was.
That's who you want to give up a home run.
He actually, if you look at his record, he had a phenomenal year and was a good closer.
Fantastic year.
And that World Series ruined him.
Forever.
He was never the same.
So I want to tie this to culture. So these trades, talent over team, and I think this is why people are more accepting of the talent moving. In an era, Dad, that you said you grow up in, that trades never happened, but also in the era of that time, people didn't switch jobs. So you would work for one company forever.
Right.
And in today's era, if you ask anybody, if you ask any of your kids or you look at your own children and you say, how many careers do you think you're going to have? Well, most people today looking at their kids would be realistic and say probably 5 or 6 jobs, 5 or 6 companies, depending on how it looks like. So having a trade in baseball is very normal because now you're cheering for the company or the players or what have you, and you can judge the company based on the talent they get.
Right.
So if you look at the culture and how it is viewed today, if you are talented and you leave for another company or someone who pays you more, completely understandable by all accounts, because people do that all the time. Just look at sports media in general. ESPN leaves for Fox Sports. Fox Sports leaves for so-and-so. They start their own brand. I mean, we started our own brand because we were wanted so much. These things happen in the society we're in today. So I think it's way more accepted, way more embraced that if you have the talent, like if Ohtani gets a contract that is so valuable that it's off the charts and everyone thinks it's amazing, no one would look at him and say, I don't think he's worth that.
I think it's expected.
I think also everybody who cheers for a team, there's players on that team and they may like them, but they know they're not staying.
Yeah.
That after this year, they're gone. And it's, they deserve more money. They can't get the money there. And they know this guy's going, but they cheer for him all year long. They don't get mad at him, you know.
And let me drive another point home on this, which is really great. And what we do as workers and what we do as sports fans, when the individual leaves your team, that individual takes on more blame than they should because it's their fault my team didn't go as far as it should. I'm sure there's a lot of that with like an Aaron Rodgers, for instance. Green Bay should have won more if it wasn't for Aaron Rodgers' performance.
But nobody in Green Bay thinks that.
But if you're looking at the work office environment and somebody were to quit, remove, change jobs, it suddenly becomes, oh, that person was so bad. Look at all of these errors in this thing he was or she was working on. So it's an interesting dynamic between the sports world and how blame has occurred versus the real world. And then you can also divide it into politics, I'm sure, because you have that whole, well, the last guy did, it's taken me a while. The last guy, it's tough. It's a struggle.
And Dad, correct me if I'm wrong. I think culturally, Brendan, and you hinted at this at the beginning, I think culturally things are different, right? It used to be that your job kind of defined the type of person you were.
Well, who you were.
Yeah. And like there was kind of a, not I want to say a glory, but kind of you were that guy. Like I worked at the plant, I was a plant guy. And this is where I was and this is what I did. Nowadays, and I think with social media and everything else, your job is just a facet or an outlet that feeds who you are as a person, and it's not tied to your job. And it's not tied to who you are. And I think that our brother Kyle said this about the show The Office, right? He said one of the things he doesn't like about The Office is the fact that it makes the office and the workplace everything about these people's lives. And the truth is nobody thinks that today. Everybody in every job is there as long as it helps feed what they want to do with their personal lives and what they're doing. Very few people are in a job because it's my mission to take this job and make societal change with this job. Now, there are differences. There are organizations like water.org and some of these other ones where like there's very mission-driven individuals who are there. They're not there because it feeds their personal lives. Their personal lives, like that's vocational for them. But that is way outside the norm now. And I think you see that especially in sports where the personality realizes that they are a brand unto themselves almost as big as the team.
Let me ask this question about, the question about team or talent. What happens when a team has a good young player and his prospects are great and the fans are just getting to dig him and he gets traded maybe at the trade deadline because they want to get a more experienced guy in to win the World Series, and they had to part with a guy and everybody in town knows that guy is going to be really good. Do they continue to follow that guy? Because I think in a way they do.
Well, did the guy want to leave? I think that's the key, right?
I think.
I mean, how many times do you hear people say, "Oh, that guy used to be on my team. I always liked him."
Only when they're
Look at
good.
the San Francisco Giants' whole lineup is ex-New York Mets.
Only when they're performing do you say that. If they're not performing, you're like, I knew he was a bum. That's why we got rid of him.
Yeah.
The other aspect of this that I think is extremely interesting from a player versus talent aspect is I think people who have gotten out of their shells to realize the talent they have is fantastic, but also like did not have an agent or a manager to see what you have and to go out there in the workplace and find something that's suitable for your talent is admirable. But there are people that I look at in sports, and I'm going to keep bringing up Ohtani. I have no idea what he is worth, but I do know it's a lot. It's just a lot. I mean, his stats this year alone at the mid-year mark are unbelievable. And the one person that I have to give a lot of credit to, for those that don't listen, CC Sabathia said this a long time ago. He said, Ohtani's the most talented guy in baseball, period. End of story. It's not even a conversation.
He is doing things that no one has ever done, including Babe Ruth. Never done this.
Correct.
Stuff. So he's at a scale that's beyond almost imagination. It's incredible what that guy can do. And
he's almost like that player when you were a kid where you're like, we have this really good kid, so he's going to play on both teams as either the automatic pitcher or automatic hitter to make it even. Because if he plays on one team or the other team, that team's going to win.
So
Brendan, you brought up something really interesting, and I want to go back to this idea. The idea that there will be more Ohtanis in the future because he's the first one to really do it, to prove you could do it. Yes, Babe Ruth was a pitcher who became an outfielder because you never mixed the two. But all of a sudden now you've got this guy who pitches really well, like more than serviceable, probably top 1, 2, or 3 starter on most teams, who also is probably the most productive hitter in the league. So now how many young kids are looking at that and they're saying, I'm going to be that. I'm going to do that. So like Roger Bannister with the 4-minute mile, you're probably going to see more and more. Now, what happens if your entire middle relief staff can pitch hit?
But hold on. There's players who's done this in the past, but the biggest transformation that I've always seen, it's not the players. Because if you remember, all these kids are excellent pitchers and excellent hitters, and the coaches tell them they have to pick. The coaches are the ones that are seeing this and transforming themselves. They're the ones that are going to say, this guy wants to hit and pitch. The player wants to do it. The coach in college, if they go to a college program, he's going to have to allow it, because if he doesn't, he's going to lose that kid to another college program. Because what Ohtani is doing is he's changing the mindset of coaches, which is the biggest thing. Now he's going to change the mindset of GMs. And I'm telling you, I don't know what his contract value is, but if you were to ask me, he's better hitting right now than Bryce Harper. I would rather have Ohtani than Bryce Harper. And that's crazy to say at the beginning of the year. As a left-handed bat, his bat is fantastic. And when he hits home runs, they're not little pop monsters.
This guy has a possibility of doing the unimaginable. And this has just never ever been considered. In the same year, winning Cy Young and home run championship. That's what?
Very realistic.
I mean, that he could do that.
Now, again, the other thing that we have to continue to tell people, this is the modern era. This is not when you had a couple pitches. These are brand new baseballs, the best pitchers ever. These are the best pitchers ever around the world. It isn't just like America. You have the best pitchers ever playing the game that you've ever had. More pitches, more difficulty.
You're not telling a whole race they can't play because of the color of their skin.
This man is literally the cream of the top of the hill, the top of everything. And I don't know what his ceiling is, because I don't think he's
okay. So Brendan, you're a GM, unlimited budget. What are you signing this guy for in the offseason?
He's got to be a $50 million year guy. There's not a 50. I mean, you would lock him up for 10, right?
You have to, at least, I think. Dad,
what do you think? You can't get him if you're his agent. Why wouldn't you want anything less than 10?
If I'm an agent with no budget problems, I'm signing him for $1 more than the highest bidder. No, I don't know. I read somewhere that some people are talking about $1 billion contract. And I said, well, that's crazy, but I don't know.
The top pitchers in the league are getting 40, 45 million. The top hitters in the league are getting 40 million. He is both. Right. You could argue that he's an 80 million, 75 million a year guy.
I was going to say 75 million, 10 years. Lock it.
Dear Lord.
Why not?
I'll tell you right now.
You're right. I don't think you lose money in that contract because of what was said earlier. Just the merchandise that can be sold with that guy's name on it to a whole country, and also all of the people in the United States who identify with him. It's unbelievable. You're not just going to, let's say the Giants sign him. Their merch isn't going to stay in San Francisco. It's going to be all through the United States, wherever there are people who have Asian backgrounds or Japanese backgrounds. They're all going to be wearing that shirt. So you're going to sell it everywhere.
Yep. So if you want to back up 3-4 years, the player on the Angels was Mike Trout.
Mike Trout, yep.
He was the best, right? Best player, has a huge contract. Ohtani has dwarfed him.
Mm-hmm.
That is crazy to say. Trout is amazing. Trout is an amazing player. He is by far worth the money. He has this terrible injury. I know it's terrible, but at the end of the day, Trout is fantastic.
Yep.
And we are now sitting in a moment where a player like Trout is being dwarfed by Ohtani. So when I would say talent over player, there are players that if you don't follow them, the Michael Jordans, the LeBron James, Ohtani is that big for baseball, and it's a disservice that baseball has not been like, this is the guy. Like, he should be on every promo.
How have they not?
But again, if you look at the NBA has gone player over team. That's what they decided under David Stern. NFL, similar. It's player over team. The team is very important, but that player superstar is a big deal. Right. The team is more important in NFL because of the budget cap. In baseball, with no budget cap, and you have a superstar of this nature, every time he pitches and hits, that should be like breaking. Like, again, I don't run ESPN, but my God, if I did, every time he pitched and hit, that game's on ESPN.
Hey, would you allow Ohtani to come onto your team and say, I need you, like the NBA, to start assembling a superstar team, and these are the guys I want?
Absolutely. I would give him carte blanche. Because the other thing is, can you imagine if he's like, this guy in Japan's really great?
Right.
I'd be like, okay, that sounds great. I'm hiring that individual.
Right.
I would think, I don't know if it's legal or what contracts are underway. I would think it's within the realm of possibility to offer the guy part ownership in the team.
Absolutely.
Yep. I think what we're definitely in for is a wild ride of his career. And this year is fantastic to follow. And if the Angels come to town, you better bring yourself to that vicinity and watch him play. And go sit in left field, right field. You may catch it, but sit way back. You can't sit by the fence. Sit way back. Go to concessions when he's up. He may hit you back there. He's fantastic. So again, we want to hear your comments. We want to hear what you have to say, whether you have a story of you or your father sitting down talking about the player that drew you to a team. I think it's always interesting to hear people talk about how they were brought to the sport, brought to being a fan. There's a lot of dads that sacrificed a lot of time out there to allow their kids to play, whether it's football, baseball, hockey. So many NBA, so many basketball players where fathers were there to help teach their kid and show them the ropes. And there's so many wonderful stories there. So share whether you think it should be talent, following the talent as an older person or a younger person, or following the team and who you would like. Because I can tell you, as my closing argument, there are teams I hate that I will not follow no matter what talent goes there. And I will tell you right now, if Ohtani signs with the Dodgers, it will be the most depressing day this guy will have had. Because that is the one team I do not want to see him go to.
Nice.
Is the Dodgers. I'm okay with him going to the Yankees over the that's how much I despise that Dodger team.
That's a good point.
I am your host, Brendan. I do appreciate all your time with us tonight, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and I look forward to your comments. Dad? Todd?
Yeah.
Gary Carter. If Gary Carter was still on the Mets, I would not be wearing the bag head. How about that?
Wow.
True story.
Well, thanks for the memory. Give me a chance to remember some things, and it's a good time.
Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Bye.